Good, hold that guys, hold that. Okay, you guys can turn around and face each other. So guys, what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna walk you through how it is from my eyes doing a proposal in the Canadian Rockies. This one in particular that we're gonna walk through is done on it's called Rockies Heli Canada. So it's a helicopter surprise proposal during the summer months in Banff. So let's dive right in. So generally what I'm doing is when I get to a location, I like to set the tone. So I like to kind of get some establishing shots of where we are. In this case, Cody, who's the gentleman that hired me, I was playing it off like I worked for the helicopter company. So as you could probably see in the videos, I'm wearing the helicopter shirt. I just look like I'm taking photos of some of the helicopters arriving and departing because I know that Cody is on site and him and his partner are gonna subconsciously see me walking around and snapping photos. The way that we've played it off is that when I get inside, I'm gonna just talk to my coworker, just like I would, like, hey, we're heading out at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock today, right? Just the usual. And I know that Cody is standing right next to me. So as you can see, as you see here, Cody is literally at the desk right next to me, him and Krystal. I don't even really acknowledge him or let him know that I exist. Sidebar. I remember being a little bit nervous because I've actually never been in a helicopter before. At this point, me and my coworker have come into the orientation room and I introduced myself as being a Rockies Heli staff member. I asked them what their names are, as you can see, and it's pretty funny because of course, they were hired, or Cody hired me. I already know their names. So I tried to put on my best Tom Cruise face here and put on as much acting as I possibly could. So what they know at this point so far is the fact that they have a helicopter flight. There's gonna be a staff member that is gonna be taking a photo of them at the top that comes with the package that they've purchased. So when I asked them to pose in front of the helicopter to start, that's not out of the normal. They don't think they've hired a professional Banff photographer. They just think that I'm just a staff member with a camera. So when I'm getting this first shot of these guys, the first thing I'm thinking in my head is that sun is bright out. This is not really the ideal time to take photos, especially in the mountains, just because it's so bright. I wanna do my best as I can to keep the sun out of going directly into their face, into their eyes. So I get their backs to the sun on this one. And with a little bit of editing magic and how I shoot, a little bit underexposed, I kind of just try to keep the tones as consistent as possible. Get to the chopper! My one request is after we shot this video on the GoPro, Sheldon, he's my editor, I said, you need to do the Arnold Schwarzenegger get to the chopper! Audio. Thanks, Sheldon. We've entered the helicopter. At this point, I'm just thinking, my photography brain, I'd do this no matter what, if I was being paid for it or not. Find little details. So I love to see the speedometer or whatever you call it in a helicopter. I like to see all those little details of showing like where we are. We set the tone, we're in the helicopter now. So I really like to get the kind of some establishing photos. As you see, once we get a little bit higher up in the air, I'll kind of really start to get some photos of the mountains, some of the rivers that we're kind of passing by. All I'm looking for is little moments that are gonna help capture the story of what we're doing today. So when I see Cody pulling out his phone to take a selfie with Krystal, obviously I'm gonna capture a sneaky photo of that. Is Maddie gonna be here with the coffee soon? Maddie, if you're watching this, hurry up with the coffee, please. I know. Get my coffee! Where's my fluffer? So at this point, we've landed the helicopter in this big valley. I didn't know that there was any hiking a part of this. So Krystal is in high heels, trekking through like alpine upper areas of the Canadian Rocky Mountains. So we're trying to find some of the best spots that she's not gonna roll an absolute ankle. Once I got them on that kind of rock, that's the decision that I made, like, hey, this is the spot we're gonna do it. We didn't really have it prearranged on where exactly I'd get them in position. I just knew as we were flying up, we landed, I was keeping my eye out for any spots in particular that would really show the area off nicely. So one of the big things I'm looking for is that, first off, they're gonna be on somewhat level ground. The worst thing ever is if you're on, like one person's on this angle, the other one's on this angle, you're barely able to stand up comfortably because when you pop down on your knee, like you need to be able to be comfortable, look up at your partner, they're not worrying about falling off a cliff or falling into the water. The next part is from a composition standpoint, we have some nice kind of leading lines that are drawing in from the tree line that's on each side of them, on each side of the river. So I'm kind of using that as a tunnel effect to be able to really draw focus to those two subjects right in the middle. Of course, we're in the Rockies. I need to show off the mountains. So we have a nice big mountain behind them that also has a nice layer of the waterfall. I knew when I got this shot lined up that when Cody dropped down onto his knee, it was gonna further expose the waterfall behind him so his body wouldn't be blocking it. So that was kind of a decision on the go. All that being said, so they're level, there's some nice leading lines, there's a good composition of the mountain and the waterfall behind them. The next part of this is where the heck is that sun coming from? So this day, fortunately, first time for me going up there, the sun worked in my favor and it got behind them. I get a lot of comments and a lot of people that ask me on my lighting choices of saying, Nick, why do you have the sun behind the person? Short answer is I would rather be able to, in editing, bring up some of the shadows, bring down some of the highlights, bring back life with some of the vibrance or saturation, than have really, really harsh light on their skin, have squinty eyes that's gonna kind of limit their emotions that I'll be able to capture. Cody knows this is a spot we're gonna be doing the proposal. I have them on that nice rock. I take a couple photos to get them started, and then Cody's been instructed, once I have them back to back, so facing away from each other, that's his cue that he could turn around and pop down onto his knee at any time. So at this point, I'm guiding them. Panoramic is the key word for Cody.
Take a panoramic photo. So I go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you just have to stay super still, or you end up being a blur. Okay, so you look that way, you look that way.
So Cody turns around, he gets a ring ready, looking like Luke Bryan, gets that hand out, has the biggest smirk on his face, ready for his partner to turn around. And at this point, so I got those key photos. A lot of times I'll shoot landscape first, so I get the whole scene, and then if I need to duplicate it to then crop in to be vertical, I can do that at that point. Oh, so cute. So that was a lovely reaction. At this point of mine, I'm like, the weight's off my shoulders. The pilot comes and drops them off some champagne that we had coordinated. This one, I just wanted them to be as present as possible, so I didn't really give them too many instructions on shaking the champagne or popping it a particular way. But it was more just like, hey, enjoy your champagne, have a minute to yourself.
Like, oh yeah! Yeah, you're right.
One little sidebar that I always try to make sure I do for all these proposals is getting photos is important, and that's what I've been hired for. But more importantly, one of my biggest priorities is to make sure that they have a good experience. So I always say, guys, have a minute to yourselves. I'm not here. Let them relax. So in this case, I got them to kind of sit down by the river and just kind of chill out. Eventually I start barking orders at them, but generally it's just relax, have some champagne, enjoy each other's presence, be mindful of what happened, because when you have a big milestone like this, it's really easy to just like go into full on adrenaline mode. You're in shock, it feels surreal. So I say, hey, take a minute, enjoy each other, and we'll go from there. They've had their moment, we've got the proposal down, weight's off all our shoulders, so we can relax, enjoy, start to have kind of a nice fun engagement photo shoot. One thing I might forget early on was to ask to take their wallets out of their pockets, or their cell phone, or the ring box. So before you get going, take a second. Look at your surroundings, look at them. It might feel weird to be staring at them like this, kind of observing their bodies, but check out how their shoes are. Are their jeans tucked? Are their shoes, is the tongue sticking out? Is there, you know, look for the little details, because it's gonna save you so much time when you go to edit your photos, rather than trying to have to like, you know, Photoshop things out of it, rather than taking a minute, just being really aware of what's going on. So at this point, I've kind of started to kind of guide them around. There's a lot of decisions that are kind of being made. I get them back on the rock because that's a really good spot to get them comfortable with the camera, get them used to a few of the different directions I'm going. In this photo, a couple people have commented, her right hand's in front, not her ring hand. So I will ask people if they have a preferred side on like, hey, do you have a side that you absolutely like better than the other? And there's some compromise there. For that shot, we don't have the ring, but she prefers how she looks from that particular angle.
Krystal, you come in front of him? Yeah, careful. Okay, so you're gonna be a little bit this way, Cody. And then you're gonna give her a bear hug from behind, like over her shoulders. Try not to pull her hair too much.
That's what she said.
So for a lot of these kind of posed photos, like I'm of course posing them in certain spots where they're gonna be cozied up towards each other, looking at each other. But one thing, look for those small pockets between the poses where they're interacting, smiling, laughing. A lot of times for my clients, this is the first time they've ever had professional photos done of them. So they're kind of looking at each other like, what are we doing? They're laughing. Look for those little pockets of moments, because a lot of times my clients will say, hey, that was one of my favorite photos from the whole session. It's one that wasn't even planned, not scripted. It was just a candid moment between the two of them. A big decision that I make when I get a client in frame is balancing the photo. So I like to fill the frame to make sure that it's not too much of just them or too much of the environment so they look like an ant. I like to find a nice healthy balance of making composition choices. So for these guys, I have them relatively centered in the frame, just a little lowered. I have a nice even amount of balance on each side of the photo that the focus is being drawn towards them. But for layers, it's really important for this that you have a nice foreground layer. So for that, that's a little bit of the rocks at the beginning. The midground is them. The kind of sub-background is the river that's flowing towards the waterfall. And then that ties everything together is the massive mountain behind them that kind of condenses everything. So I think I have this being shot at, around almost 70 millimeters. So I've stepped back a little bit. I'm at 70, so it's kind of compressed the mountain to be a little bit more looming above them. Just kind of keeping them nice and centered like that, not having it just awkwardly to one side or awkwardly to the other. It's just a little bit more pleasing to our eyes on how we see symmetry and how we have an image that's composed. So, and then for some of these photos, guys, what I really like to do is kind of mix where their eyes are going. So for some of them, I'll get Krystal to look at Cody while Cody looks at the ring, or I'll get Cody to look at Krystal as Krystal looks at the ring, and make these different kind of like decisions on where their eye lines are going. Sometimes it's referred to as like an eye line triangle, or it's referred to as like kind of just like different lines of sight where you are creating a story just basically off where people are going. Cody's looking at Krystal and smiling, and she's smiling at the ring. Gives context to what we're doing up there. Yeah. Oh, Maddie. Guys, we need to take a little commercial break. Cut. For this one, the only challenge was that we had them on a really like specific spot. So in this case, we had them kind of resting on that rock. It was great for the composition and the lighting and certain things, but when it came down to just getting them to do some movements, you saw the spin, it worked out okay, but it's not like I can get them to walk towards me or run towards me or walk, there are some limitations with that particular spot. So keep that in mind. Some of them can be a little bit too stationary. This spot where I have them lined up, they're kind of nicely in the shade, the sun's behind them. And I noticed that I could pick up some nice color that's coming from the water. A little bit washed out in my opinion, but we were able to grab onto some blues and greens that are coming down through the waterfall, which was nice, and still pick up some of the mountains behind the waterfall there. So one walking that way, one walking the other. That's kind of just a nice way to kind of mix up each location and get some different compositions for each spot. So like I said, like how I used the tree line in the previous composition, to kind of like funnel them in and make them the nice frame in the photo. What this one did nicely was kind of shooting through someone. So in this case, I got Cody to stand in front of me. I had Krystal in the background. I told Cody to look at her. And basically what this did was it kind of created a nice layer of depth while keeping my subjects kind of in the frame. So in this one, it's just like, Cody, look at your partner, try to make her giggle. Krystal, look, hold out the ring, smile, laugh. So this added some nice depth, framed her nicely within him in the foreground, had the waterfall and the mountain in the back. And here's a case of me trying to show my clients. Sometimes like you can describe it all you want, but sometimes just getting in there, showing them what you want from their body language, that could be a little bit helpful. For me, this is a pose I do quite often. For them, this is probably something that they've never had to do. So by getting in there, showing them, that'll be a little bit helpful. Just kind of have the ring in the foreground, using Cody's arm as a kind of a leading line towards Krystal, kind of sneaking in that waterfall behind her head in this shot. As you see me here, adjusting the ring to make sure it's not skewed one way or the other and keeping it in the middle. That's a subtle thing. It's obviously really important if you're doing a detailed shot of the rings, but in general, throughout the session, it shouldn't ever be moved too much, so keep that in mind. One thing I showed them, and it's reflected in these photos, when they are facing each other, cozied up, her arms on his bicep, his hands on her hip, What's important is that they're not just standing stiff as a board facing each other, because it kind of looks weird. The body language almost comes across as confrontational. So it's really important to make sure that you guys have them kind of like puzzle piece in towards each other. Have one foot forward, have a toe up, you know, kick up a foot in the air, have a little bit of kind of action happening within the photo. That'll make it look a little less stale, a little bit more natural. I always encourage my clients to like laugh, smile, play, boop noses, sneak in kisses where you can. That way it kind of keeps it light and not so much like hold this pose and stare at the camera or stare at one another. So my GoPro unfortunately died for the last little stretch of the photo, so maybe I'll get my editor to clip in some of the photos that happened afterwards. But essentially this was a good example of a proposal where there's a lot of moving parts. So between myself, Cody, the helicopter company, the actual pilot that day, there was a lot of things happening that kind of needed to go right to make sure that we can kind of pull this off properly without her finding out. For something like this, like a lot of it is kind of improvising and kind of making the best that you can with the situation. So the location, the lighting, the couple, what they're wearing, there's a lot of variables. The best way to kind of practice for something like this is just straight up shoot in every scenario. Shoot indoors in a really crappy warehouse and kind of figure out your settings. Go to the brightest day in the Saharan desert and get used to shooting in those types of highlights and those kinds of hot spots. After shooting in all these different situations, you'll be able to have a toolkit that you'll be able to whip out in situations and say like, okay, these are the fundamental things that I need to keep in mind to make sure this photo turns out. Oh my God. Let's do a lap. We're gonna do a lap here. Cool guys, that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks for checking it out. Shout out to Rockies Heli Canada for being a part of this and like letting me and Cody work with you guys to come up with an elaborate plan. That was a ton of fun. Of course, flying up in a helicopter in the Canadian Rocky Mountains is a really special thing, let alone when you're proposing to your future wife. So congratulations to these guys. I appreciate y'all tuning in and we will see you next week.